Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center and Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. With service built around courtesy, dignity, and respect, Mayo-trained Dr. Charles Crutchfield personally treats each patient and is acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org. Edina Eye Physicians and Surgeons, a division of Twin Cities Eye Consultants, has proudly served the Twin Cities for more than 55 years now in 7 convenient locations. Using the most advanced technology combined with human touch, Edina Eye offers comprehensive services and dedicated specialists committed to excellence with innovative procedures and expertise for the most advanced eye care.
Welcome to this edition of Access to Democracy. I'm SFrancisco. You know, we've had over the years several guests on our show who have talked about issues of hunger domestically here in the U.S. We've had representatives from food shelves who provide nutritious food to people in need in our own community. Today we're going to be talking about a global hunger issue, particularly global hunger affecting children. And I'm very pleased to invite to our studio today our guest. Mark Crea is the Executive Director and CEO of a great organization called Feed My Starving Children. Mark, welcome to Access to Democracy.
Thank you, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's get right into it. You have had extensive experience both working in for-profits and in nonprofits. Tell us just briefly a little bit about your experience.
Sure. Came out of college here in the Twin Cities, a St. Paul kid, and went to work for the Hazelden Foundation, world pioneer in alcohol and drug treatment. Spent 17 years there in sales and marketing, and after that went into the for-profit world for a number of years. Came back to the nonprofit world, and then in 2004, the beginning of 2004, came to Feed My Starving Children as Executive Director and CEO, and I've been there ever since for 18 years now.
So tell us just briefly, Mark, what is Feed My Starving Children? When did it start, and what drew you to work there?
Yeah, well, it did fit kind of who I was as an individual, but professionally. So it began in 1987. St. Paul businessman Richard Proudfoot started the organization. It started doing some different things. He was on a mission trip in Honduras and was just struck by how many starving, hungry children he encountered. And so he started coming back here and sending surplus food and things, and that really wasn't what the children needed. And so he worked with food scientists. So Minnesota, the Twin Cities, is the home of some of the best food scientists in the world here. And they're the ones that originally created this formula. Now, it's been updated many times since then, but it was, let's not just provide some food, let's give a child who's malnourished or worse really the ideal food to rebuild them.
Right. We're going to talk more about what you've brought to show us today,
Right.
the Manna Packs, in just a few minutes. A little bit more background about your organization. Feed My Starving Children is a Christian nonprofit
Yes.
organization, but that doesn't mean that you only provide food for Christian children in developing countries around the world. How many countries are you active in? Is your organization active in?
So we would say nearly 70 countries around the world, in all parts of the world. And Feed My Starving Children is very unique in the relief world. So we have this scientifically designed food. Until the pandemic hit, 100% of that food, Steve, was produced by volunteers. People who come into our facilities generally work for 2 hours. So in 2019, we had 1.4 million volunteers, Americans all throughout the country who came in. A lot of young people, half our volunteers are under the age of 18. And so in a way, it was kids feeding kids. So you've got scientifically designed food packed by volunteers, and then we give this food, and we have done that through a network of embedded NGOs and missionaries.
In the countries
In the
where you
country.
work.
So we're giving the food directly to them because they are directly caring for the people.
This seems like a good point for me to mention. As I shared with you before we started taping today's show, my wife and I had the pleasure of volunteering at your Chanhassen site in December this past year. And not only did we help provide the packs, but the volunteer group that came from my wife's employer, we all made donations to the organization too. But as I shared with you, and I want to share with our viewers, it was a tremendous experience because the first thing that impressed me, it was so well organized. And many of the people had never volunteered someplace before where they had helped pack the manna packs and getting them shipped off to countries where kids are hungry. And it just was a tremendous experience. And we were impressed too, as you mentioned, there were a lot of young people who had never volunteered before. In fact, there was a contingent from Chick-fil-A, I believe, in Savage, that were volunteering and very enthusiastic and excited to be doing this. So volunteers get a lot out of this experience too.
Yeah. Our mission, feeding God, starving children hungry in body and spirit. So feeding the spirits of the volunteers is equally important to us. So you come in here, give us your hands for 2 hours, and you're going to make a tremendous difference. You're going to provide meals to children who desperately need this, who need the hope that comes from having not just a full tummy, but the food that will help build you up.
Right. And at the end of the session, the volunteer session, we were actually shown a video that showed us exactly how many packs did we pack that day in that 2 hours collectively, and how many meals did we provide. And it was just such a great feeling to see, tangible, substantive information about what we had just done. You talked about the fact that your organization is working in some 70 countries around the world. Americans and people all over the world have been heartbroken over the tragedy that we see unfolding in the Ukraine with Russia's invasion and the war in Ukraine. Your organization has done work in Ukraine and is doing work in Ukraine. Tell us something about that.
Okay, Steve. We have been working in Ukraine for 8 years now. And so there has been conflict going on, not at this level, but feeding refugees that have fled the eastern provinces, the very poor who can't get out of some of those areas. And so we've been working with a network on the ground there, and that's how we do it, that has been feeding people for a long time. So we're there. We've got right now, not only in Ukraine, but in Eastern Europe. So you've got Poland and Romania, others where refugees have gone. So there are 16 organizations based in those areas that we're working with actively right now. As of today, we have sent or are in the process of shipping nearly 4.5 million meals of ManaPack to those partners to feed people.
Hungry people.
Yeah, and the children especially.
And very important, there was just an announcement from the United Nations, I believe yesterday or 2 days ago, that said 1 out of 2 children, 50% of all of the children living in Ukraine have been displaced by this war. And that's a horrible thing to contemplate. 50% of the kids who don't know where they're going to sleep, where they're going to get their next bath or shower, where they're going to get food to survive. And then being part of this mass exodus, this refugee crisis that is going into Poland and Romania and Moldova and some of the countries surrounding Ukraine. So your work there is very important.
It is, and so for people to help us do that, on top of the other 69 countries that we're currently working in. So we've got commitments this year to all of them. This has to above and beyond that. And that's what we're trying to do right now.
Very good.
It's so important for those kids to have that. Our partners on the ground are telling us people very quickly in this situation can go from being healthy to being malnourished and worse when you simply can't have access to food, when you're on the run. All those things can very quickly take a toll on people, especially children.
Right. You wanted to tell us a story about some of your work in Haiti as well.
Yep. So Haiti is our #1 country, Steve. We've been there. There are likely 300 organizations that utilize our food on the ground, from big to small organizations. So one of the things we do is we use the larger partners we have there to help redistribute our food to many smaller organizations that are just too small for us to work directly with. So some weeks ago, one of those small organizations that got their food from a bigger one, husband and wife, they had 20 children in their orphanage, contacted us and said, it's too unsafe. We can't get to the compound to get our food each month. And we haven't been able to do that for the last 2 months. And so what has happened to our 20 children is in the last 6 weeks, we have been able to feed our children only once a week. 1 meal a week. Well, that's not sustainable. Is there anything you can do? And so through our partners on the ground and these folks, they met at an undisclosed location at 2 o'clock in the morning to connect up, to be able to, when hopefully bad guys are asleep, and to get their food. And the message to us the next day from them was, we have our food, our children are now eating every single day.
You know, it's so regrettable when we look at what the root causes are of child hunger around the world.
Yes.
Some of them are beyond our control, to be sure. Natural disasters, hurricanes, typhoons, things, earthquakes, things such as this. But many of the reasons that we have children that are hungry in the world are man-made. They are political, they are wars, they are political fights going on in countries where immoral leaders use food as a weapon to punish people, including kids. So there are myriad causes that lead to hunger, but thank goodness we have an organization like yours that's trying to do something about it. And you get no government money, right? You are a nonprofit, you don't receive government money. You rely totally on donations and the service of volunteers.
That's the horsepower. So you are right. It is the $100 donation that is, the backbone of Feed My Starving Children. 24 cents feeds a child for a day.
That's for one meal.
That's
24 cents one meal.
And this is that highly nutritious, all the vitamins and minerals, protein that child needs. That's the lifesaver. And so to have that, there's enough food in the world to feed everyone. We just get in the way, meaning man gets in the way of allowing that to happen. So our partners on the ground are embedded. They're there, and people would say, well, who are they? Who do you work with? Very simple. I'll describe them in 3 ways. They have the heart of a pastor, they have the head of an entrepreneur, and they have the guts of a Marine.
Wow.
And they get things done, and they feed those kids when most of us would go, I don't know how that's possible.
And again, I want to reiterate what the World Food Organization has said, that hunger, childhood hunger, is the biggest solvable problem in the world. There's no reason that this is not a problem beyond the ability of policymakers, NGOs, nonprofits such as yours to deal with. I want to talk about the centerpiece of your work. You have brought an example of this, and if we can get a shot of this, tell us about the Manna Pack. What is it?
Well, this is the ideal food for a malnourished, hungry, starving person, child particularly. It's got a combination of 4 main ingredients. So when you go and pack, this is what you're going to be told.
This is what we did.
That's right. So you're going to put veggies, dehydrated vegetables in there. There is a artificial or a vegetarian chicken flavor that's mixed in with all of the vitamins and minerals. That's the powerhouse of the food. The scientists have designed that to bring that child, to bring that person everything they need. You got the soy, which is the protein punch for the food, and then you have rice in this case, which is the carbs. So very light, 140-foot container, that's how we ship this food, contains 272,000 meals.
Wow.
And so that's what is going to go overseas. That's what's going to get distributed. You cook this up, and you cook it like you would cook rice. And if there's anything local, it's very easy to adapt and add other ingredients, other flavors, other spices to it.
Which make the food more attractive to
That's
the
correct.
people it's
Yep.
intended for,
Yep.
and may fit with cultural customs in a particular part of the world. too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very interesting. You also have different types of manna packs. This is the basic one that you
Right.
have, but don't you have manna packs that deal with issues dealing with people with digestive problems,
Right.
and also one for people that may be weaning infants as well, correct?
Right, and they're a little bit different. So our Manna Pack potato, we have a D and a W. So the D is I'll say this, an anti-diarrheal food. So for cholera, outbreaks, other things where you digestive, especially for young kids, for children, can be so devastating to them.
And we're talking about food going to kids in countries where they may not have, probably don't have, a guaranteed supply of safe drinking water.
Correct.
And when you don't, it leads to those types of problems
Yep.
that lead to dehydration and other
Yep.
health
And for a
problems that
child-
just cascade.
Yeah, that can just, a child can perish in a matter of days. The Manna Pack W is the weaning formula. So in essence, if there isn't a mom there to nurse the child, if the child's an orphan or something, what do? Try to find formula is very, very difficult. So this is in essence a substitute for that. Or for a child that's done nursing and still needs that bridge between that and when they can use this food.
Mark, your website says that there are 5 important elements that sort of differentiate Feed My Starving Children from other groups. There are many other groups out there doing good work too, trying to
Sure there are.
feed hungry children around the world. Talk about those 5 elements. One that you mentioned on your website, sustainable development. What are we talking about there?
So what our partners on the ground, what we hear and say is, this is the foundation. So when we look at sustainable things, how do we teach someone to fish, not just give them a fish, okay? But if I'm so sick or weak that I can't hold a fishing pole, that doesn't work for me. So let's get them nutritionally healthy. Then if they're in school, then if they're just going to farm, be a farmer, be a laborer, I'm going to have a healthy body to do that.
Right.
And that's what's critical
so that they
for
can
us.
begin growing their own food to become sustainable.
That's correct.
Less reliant on
But
this
it's
type
got
of
to
aid.
start somewhere. It's got to start with this, and particularly to get children started well. And the UN, others just talk about that all the time. Those initial first 1,000 days of a child are so important. Well, this for 24 cents a serving, a meal, let's do that and get that child off to a good start.
You talked already, I think, about the, you mentioned pioneering food formulas, which we talked about with the Manna Packs. Another element, we talked a little bit about volunteerism and that you're a Christian mission and food distribution partners. So those were some of the others that you think sort of differentiate FMSC's work from other organizations.
Yep.
Describe how much the demand has grown in recent years to address this problem of global childhood hunger.
And I would tell you, especially these last 2 years, these last 2 COVID years, has set the world hunger issue back. Again, going to the UN, others, 10 years is what they're saying. So all the progress that's been made, because so many of the countries just simply weren't able to cope well with this, and it caused so many more people to go into a spiral of hunger and malnutrition.
Well, in the developed world, we know for a fact that there wasn't nearly as much vaccination of adults and children as
Right.
there has been in the United States and in Western Europe in developed countries. Even though our country, the United States and others, have made donations, it's really just been a fraction of what's needed in those countries to help them deal with the ongoing effects of the pandemic.
Yep. So, so right now, so we're looking at this year, our goal is to produce 425 million meals this year, to distribute that throughout the globe. Our partners, so the missionaries, NGOs embedded, have asked us this year for 525 million meals. So 100 million meals more. That is the biggest gap I have ever seen in my 18 years here. That's a result of the pandemic. That's a result of just where the need is globally around there. That doesn't include disasters. That doesn't include other things that we know will be affected this year.
Your ability to hit that goal, to produce that many meals, really depends on all of us, right?
Absolutely.
Donating, volunteering, helping pack the manna packs and getting them shipped to the countries where they're in need. And I have to ask you, you're going to be able to hit this goal? You're going to be able to meet it, do you think?
We have been. The Lord always makes a big difference for us every year, Steve, I would tell you. So, but it's a huge, we start at zero. You know, at the beginning of every year and say, okay, we've got to raise all of this money so we can produce all these meals. We buy all the ingredients to do that here in the United States, and then we got to have the volunteers, and of course we've got the partners then ready, and we're dealing with all the logistics, all of the supply chain that everybody is dealing with.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Mark, because your website points out you've shipped 2.7 billion meals to some of the most difficult places in the world, and that 99.8% of these meals have successfully reached hungry children for whom they were meant. That's a phenomenal track record. And it's only possible because of the partnerships you have on the ground in the developing countries and the work of your volunteers, your staff, and your donors.
And I would tell you God's protection. And so the sheet's going to be updated just almost as we speak, because we're in our new, I told you, we got this odd fiscal year. So the latest number, the 99.8% is still accurate, is 3.4 billion meals.
Wow.
And then that's just this last year, adding all of that to that number. And that's a remarkable number, going to very, very difficult places.
I have to mention, too, that when people make donations, they are moved by an organization's work. They sit down to write that check, and people wonder, how's my money going to be spent? Is it going to get to the people that it needs to get to? And we have to point out here, your organization has received the highest 4-star rating from Charity Navigator, which assesses nonprofit organizations, how well they're fulfilling their mission, how efficient are they in using donor dollars. That puts your organization in the top 1% of charities nationwide, right?
Yes. Yeah, it does. 17 years in a row, and Charity Navigator tells us you're in rare air, because that just doesn't happen. Well, it happens because we focus on that. Pennies matter here. 24 cents feeds a child. When we're looking at something, it is, can we save $1 on this? To our vendors, if you do that, we'll feed 4 more kids. That's our simple math. And so that's what we strive every single day to do, to feed the greatest number of kids possible.
Very good.
Yeah.
I want to ask you real quickly, we talked about some of the causal factors contributing to child hunger, and as I thought about this, I wanted to ask you, what impact do you see climate change having on the ability to stop child hunger in the developing world? We're hearing reports of rampant deforestation around the world, in Asia, the Amazon, and South America. agriculture land that used to be used to grow crops is being used for other purposes or being cleared for other developments. How important is climate change, do you see, as a threat to our ability to feed hungry children around the world?
It is, Steve, it's one of the main factors for that. I would tell you, man is the first most critical piece that said what stops us or what contributes to difficulty in feeding people. And then climate change, other things that just impact how much food can get produced. Particularly in some countries around the world, how much deforestation, how much soil erosion, all of those things we've seen in countries where that's happened, and now there just isn't a good growing ability there. So now what do you do in countries like in Haiti, where the soil has been depleted because of those factors, and it's just difficult.
We're going to be hearing more about this, and I think it's going to be more of a challenge as we adjust to climate change and what's happening. Mark, we're down to our last 2 minutes, and I don't want to let you get away today without talking. First of all, where can our viewers go if they are interested in volunteering with Feed My Starving Children, or perhaps making a financial donation to support the work of your organization? Where can they go?
Steve, thank you. It is simply fmsc.org.
Good, we're showing it on our program right now.
So that's where you go. You go there to sign up and volunteer. You go there to go ahead and make a donation. You've got our marketplace, which is where we engage with artisans in countries through our partners. They earn a sustainable living. We bring those items here. They're available online. They're available at our sites. It's a great way.
And you can buy them online and ship them to your house or to a friend.
What do you get grandma anymore for who's got everything, or your parents, and say, here's a great way to honor them.
And we have graduations coming up soon, so wonderful gifts. We saw your marketplace at your facility in Chanhassen where we were packing the Manna Packs. So
great shirts that you can get, all kinds of things there that will give someone a livable wage, take care of a family, and on top of that, generate income so we can produce more meals.
It's a twofer. It's a twofer.
It's the best.
Yeah. And the merchandise, I have to add, is just really beautiful. Some of the crafts that you're selling.
Awesome job.
So please, folks, take a look at their website.
Yep.
Mark Crea, Executive Director of Feed My Starving Children, I want to thank you for being our guest today, but more than that, I want to thank you and the men and women who volunteer and the donors who support the important work you do. Thank you for joining us today on Access to Democracy.
Thank you, Steve. My pleasure.